yeah, I saw right when I hit join, I was like, the video call will be recorded. I'm like, oh, it's already recording. I'm like, all right, and I thought we're gonna jump right
We're
into
gonna
it.
jump right
So
into it, bro. We ain't messing around because, like I said, it's just, and not only that, with social media, everyone like they want us to get to the point. They don't want us to
right.
lollygag about my background and your background and this and
Hmm.
that, right? And then like the last 15 minutes of the video is us actually talking about, nah, bro. Like I just want to jump into it, dude. So you got any questions before we get started?
I'm ready to rock. Yeah.
All right, let's jump into it. Just wanted to talk to you about your story. We did a one-on-one session. And like I told you before, the YouTube channel is just all about talking about the spiritual realm, Holy Spirit, living by the Spirit, right? All the stuff that kind of
Hmm.
usually freaks out people. I'm not talking about just even believers, right? But just normal people, freaks
Yeah.
them out. And so I just want to kind of make it normal. Like I said, I know you, I was there. So I experienced firsthand what you're about to talk about. Because like I said, there's so many people on YouTube that are just doing whatever and saying salacious stuff just for clicks and all that kind of stuff. And I could
Mm.
care less about that. I just really want to educate people and getting to know you more. That's kind of your cup of tea. You want to eventually be teaching this kind of stuff. So I thought it would be perfect. One, because we had, or you had, a powerful experience in the supernatural. And the second part is, but you're on fire right now. I see it. I see it, and like I do, and it's funny that I got my little fireplace because I literally want to fan the flame with you. That was one of the things I kind of felt the Lord saying, "Hey, take you under my wing." And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, God
Oh
was asking me
yeah.
to reach out to you to mentor you." So it's like that's what I'm saying. But you're on fire right now, and I can tell you want to tell, again, as much or as little of your past that you want, but mainly the story of you getting set free, because that's what it's all about. What you encountered, brother, a lot of people don't even know is an option. They're struggling with hurt, pain from trauma, their past, all that kind of stuff. So with
Hmm.
that said, let's just jump right into it and just tell us
Yeah.
about your session when we got together one-on-one. Maybe just real quick, kind of talk about why we got together, right? Like what
Hmm.
you were dealing with. And then, like I said, your experience.
Oh gosh.
And
Sometimes,
we got 2 hours. So again,
yeah.
we got 2 hours. Take your time. And again, we don't have to use the whole 2 hours, but we've got it just so we're not rushed.
For sure. For sure. No, I appreciate the time here. Again, John.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, getting plugged into church was, I mean, just to give it a little bit of context as to how the session really came about, because as you mentioned, I had no idea that this was an actual option for me. Um, Maybe just to share some background too. For the most part of my life, I'm used to just doing things on my own. Like I have to solve it on my own. I've got to figure it out on my own. Maybe I need to ask the right people, and then it kind of then I get some clarity on my own. So doing something with someone, like a spiritual session in this case, I never thought that that was something that was going to open up so many, or really just open up the most important door, and that's the one with Christ. um Getting plugged into the church has, for me, been a little bit anxiety driven, because I don't know if I'm gonna, I'm gonna say these terms in how I used to think. I thought that I needed to fit in. I needed to kind of be like everyone else and sort of just kind of blend in so that I don't stick out. Because then people maybe want to get to know me a little bit more, and normally with getting to know me requires kind of peeling back some layers on, oh hey, well, what do you do? How's life been? Well, in life, really, I mean, in the last over the last decade has been tough. As I've mentioned, with you, I've shared my story with you and a few others at the church. Um, you know, I, I've been in just so much isolation that it was hard for me to really kind of fathom. All right, I'm in a new church. I'm going to take some baby steps. But then I started walking forward, meeting certain people. How I got to meet you was really just approaching, someone in the prayer on the prayer team at church. And so, after service one Sunday, I just walked on down and spoke with that individual. And just kind of, I really just shared with them what I've been struggling with, and they could tell, they could see it was weighing really heavy. I believe. I believe you were not there the first time
Correct.
that I met this individual. Yeah, and the second time I came to service, I remember meeting with another. She was one of the directors, and so after speaking with her, well, I met with this individual again on the prayer team, and I'm naming. I know you know who I'm talking about, but
Yeah,
just just for their privacy,
of course.
I'm just who I'm just talking about. I met up with these two individuals. Then after the second service, a second time I went in person, and again I just shared with them what I've been struggling with. It was not easy for me to really elaborate why this is so heavy, because then it goes into my story, it goes into my past, it goes into what I've been dealing with, and just it's like unpacking everything in a minute for the sake of, hey, let's pray about it. And it's a lot. Even just thinking about it, it's a lot, but I'm excited to share this with you, and again I appreciate the opportunity. So after the second time, again, meeting with these individuals, just really setting a plan forward, hey, I'm gonna meet with a one-on-one coach. I'm gonna, again, just continue taking baby steps. And so that ultimately led to, again, following up next Sunday, for service. Then that's when I meet you.
Hmm.
Okay. I go and have my one-on-one in the morning. Then I go to second service, and then I go back down. And I see the same individual that I've been connecting with on the prayer team, and I just wanted to go down and say hello and again, and just thank him for it's been a good set of steps, moving forward. And then he introduced me to you. You were, I think you were hovering nearby, and that's
You know what's
when
funny? The reason why I was hovering is I was actually shadowing him. Even though I have experience doing this, I was new to this church as well.
yeah,
And
that's
so
right.
I think that was either my second or third week of just shadowing. So that's what I was supposed to
Hmm.
be doing, was just observing, right?
Makes
Even though he
sense.
was like, bro, I should be observing, like literally, he'll admit this. He was like, I should be observing you. I was like, nope, I'm observing you. And what's interesting, Joseph, is that morning when you walked up, right? You guys hugged, and I assumed you guys knew each other for a while. The way you hugged, like, what's up, bro? How you been? And then
Yeah, I was
right,
grateful. Yeah.
he introduced me to me, introduced us to each other, and it was very
Hmm.
interesting, right? And so again, for those listening on the podcast right now, I literally heard the Lord say, you take this one, talking about me talking to you. I didn't know what your situation was at that point. You weren't emotional, you were just saying hi, like, what's up, right? And so then I was just like, hey,
Yep.
how can we help you? But even afterwards, I told the guy that I was supposed to be shadowing, I kind of apologized to him and said, hey man, I'm sorry I took he goes, no dude, I could tell this was yours. So again, right,
Well,
just listening to the Lord, me just saying, hey, like, I literally heard, like, take this one.
mhm. Yeah, no, and and you're right. When I approached him, I embraced him. I wanted to thank him. I was like, hey, thanks for really just helping me walk forward. Thanks for walking with me.
Yeah.
Really is and I wanted to thank him again. And I wanted to ask for additional prayer.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask for additional prayer. Kind of being transparent with him, just saying, hey, this is how my one-on-one's been going. Like it feels like I'm just kind of not, I'm not tippy-toeing, but I'm just taking baby steps.
Right.
And so, yes, when you were nearby, he we talked a little bit more about just what's been weighing on my heart and just kind of getting it off. And then I got emotional again.
Yeah.
Again, this was just incredibly hard. And I remember he mentioned the seminar. He mentioned, this was looking forward.
Right.
What's crazy to me is this was before even knowing about the session, because I didn't get to know about the session until the following week. So that's what's crazy. I met you here and I was like, hey, this is John. He's going to be hosting a seminar. You should come to it. Hey, by the way, there's, this Thursday dinner, kind of
Mhm.
talking about men's group and getting a little bit more plugged in. And so I felt excited. I felt excited to, continue like, hey, man, I feel like I'm being really embraced at this church. And, hey, let me give it a shot. Let me really kind of step in and be
That's
intentful
cool.
and earnest. And so, I thought then to myself, okay, cool. I'm holding myself accountable to, to some things that are going to be happening in the future. Awesome. And then my intent then, I look forward to Thursday dinner because
Mhm.
you mentioned you were going to be there. One of the other pastors was going to be there, and and this individual too may or may not be able to go. So it was just
Right.
I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. Thursday comes along. This was at Rudy's, right?
Yeah.
And
Rudy's
so
barbecue.
yeah, I remember y'all were just sitting there. I had gotten there a little late because of work, and I remember there was an open spot between you and someone at the from the police department. Right between you both. I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna sit next to John.
Yeah.
He's the only one that I really know here and recognize from the group because I had not met anyone else yet. And so I remember that you and I we were talking and talking, and I was a bit timid. I was timid to share kind of what I'd been going through. I was speaking really in general because
Right.
I think I mentioned to you that night, hey, if I start going into the story, it's not the right setting. I like it to be a little bit more private. Um, for many reasons, of course. And so just,
Mhm.
my own anxiety, social anxiety there mixed in. But then I remember vividly, it was like, I felt compelled to share more with you. And I said, hey, John, um, if you want, we can go get some coffee. I remember we ended up going to Starbucks. I think after that, either before or after, I don't remember the detail here. I offered to give you a ride.
Yeah.
Um, but most importantly, I was like, I really hope, I thought to myself, I really hope he has some time. I want to just share with him more. And deep down, like spiritually, I was feeling open up, like be
Mhm.
vulnerable. Like, it's okay. It's safe. Because that's normally what I'm always thinking in the back of my mind is like, is it safe? Like, can I trust someone? Can I trust this person? Can I share my story? Like, what's the risk? And then, because after I do, sometimes I feel good about sharing it and being vulnerable, but then I don't feel good about how that is going to get used
Right.
and how I'm going to be judged, or what's the opinion, and maybe what's going to be misunderstood. Did I not clarify something? As I'm saying all these little details,
Yeah.
whoever, anyone listening or watching, they're probably like, man, like, yeah, this guy's an overthinker. And I am. I really am. You've called it out once or twice, and I call it out. I mean, earlier today, right? Just my anxiety with that. But I overthink. I remember then we went to Starbucks. We sat down, we talked, got to know a little bit more about your story, and you were so new to the church, and you got plugged in, and things were just rolling, rolling, rolling. So I just listening to you, I was like, wow, I thought he'd been going here for maybe a couple, like maybe at least a year. That's
Right.
why I was like, hey, how long have you been going to the church now? Thinking like, oh, he's been here for a minute. Oh no, 3 months, man, like less than 3 months. Wait, all this has been happening. And so we talk more, and then I remember we go outside, and
Hmm.
I share everything with you, and I broke down a little bit too, because recalling parts of my past. I mean, yeah, I have PTSD from it. I was diagnosed with PTSD from it, and so that's why I go to therapy, just to, again, talking past tense. I still go to therapy, but speaking past tense, I've been so focused the last 2 years, and just unpacking it, working with it, trying to understand it, how to move forward with it, which are all healthy things, right? But sometimes for me, it feels like, well, when's the end of it? Well, when do I really feel like I move forward? When do I really feel like I've taken ownership of everything, and I can saddle up and say, all right, cool, I'm ready to walk into the world more, and not feel so like I'm overthinking it all again, and
Right.
spending a weekend and a half or a week and a half just pondering and pondering and saying, oh, I gotta get recluse again. And so that's been my cycle, really. This is kind of what I'm describing.
Right.
So yeah, I share my story with you, and um you didn't interrupt once. You were just so intentful. You listened, and you really wanted to understand more and more about where the roots of all of this. And I'm not going to try to dissect your thinking, but kind of
Sure.
just from my perspective, it really just felt like you wanted to understand.
Hmm.
You really wanted to understand, and I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel judged at all. I felt like you just really just wanted to walk hand in hand as a friend, just saying, "Hey, you're not alone, man." Like, I remember you shared part of your story with me, and I'm just like, "Wow!" Like, no, I mean, yeah, we different types of burdens that we all carry, but the feeling, the emotion, the all of the negative things that just pour into our hearts and minds are relatable.
Right.
What caused them is different, sure, but
Correct.
how we feel them, my goodness. And it's always felt for me, just circling back, like I've always just had to do it on my own. Like I'm not worthy of sharing this burden with anyone, because one, I thought, and egotistically, I will admit, they're not going to understand. No one's gone through this. There's no way that
Right.
maybe they've had a family member or a friend, and maybe there's like some outside perspective, but no one will really know what it is I'm going through. But that's not the point, I started to realize. And this now, but before I get ahead of myself, I remember you just that following that on the 26th, that that Sunday at service. This was right after men's dinner from Thursday. So that following service, I remember you asked me, you just offered it right away. You're like, hey man, like this is what I feel like the Lord's calling me to do, and I want to offer you a session where we can sit down. We can. And you explain what that process sort of looked like. You didn't go into detail because the way you described it is said. I know I remember. I think I cut you off. I said, "Hey, no, I don't even need to think about it. Like let's do it. Like I'm in. I'm invested. I'm invested in this because I'm tired of doing it alone. I'm tired. I want to have so much control over the things that I really can't control, and doing it on my own is just going to lead me to an early grave. Is really what it began to feel like. And so,
Right.
because sharing this with people just drained me more than it did made me feel better, that I was vulnerable, that I was open, that I maybe it could help someone, maybe it didn't, but then I would be more self-centered around, oh man, now I'm going to feel even more isolated because no one really wants to be with someone who has this kind of a past.
Right.
But you offered that to me, that session, to connect and to be in a much more intimate moment with Christ. Is the way is the way I was thinking about it. Like, hey, this is a spiritual session, deep prayer, deep meditation together. It's unexplicable, like what you will experience, but
Right.
in terms of like how we approach it, for me, it felt like a no-brainer. I said, hey, let's do it. Like, I don't even need to think about this. Let's do it, John. And man, I mean, then to our surprise, I think both of us, correct me, keep me honest here. Right away, I think the next day or the later that night, you said, hey, availability is actually tomorrow at 4.
Tomorrow. Yeah. I was shocked.
Because usually I think again, keep me honest, I think it's like more
About
so
a
like
week.
about a week. And so I thought, this is not a coincidence. Like, this is, the Lord's timing is, hey, before he goes and starts overthinking it again, let me just make it available right
Oh
now.
my gosh. I didn't even think about that. See, that's what's so cool about God is he knows us all individually. So he knew that Joseph Gallegos needed it within 24 hours, or he might, yeah, dude, that's a trip.
Mhm. Yep. And so like I said, I immediately agreed to it, and gosh, what a change of pace for my life. What a revelation what an awakening, really. Just thinking back on the 27th of January. I mean, it's not even been a whole month.
Not even a month, bro.
I'm just looking up at my calendar. It's not even a whole month. And I mean, I remember normally I work from home on Mondays, and so I decided, hey, I want to make sure I'm not late. So I'm going to go and work at the office. It's close by. And when the pastor's like, hey, let's do it at 4, I was like, well, that's when I'm off from work.
Yeah.
Okay, hey, I'm going to prioritize this. I get to decide. Am I gonna, hey, work's kind of, work's got me a little bit late to this. No. I mean, no, God comes first.
Priorities. That's right.
Yeah, no, it's like God comes first. That, and I'm putting my foot down for this. And so I show up, and I didn't know what to expect. Of course, I mean, I know I sat down with both you and the pastor, and gosh, I mean, I felt right away that I needed to kind of explain myself in a sense. And I know the pastor allowed me the opportunity because only you really had known everything that I've shared with you. And so I thought, okay, well, let me maybe give some context so that way he understands why we're here. Again, it's just sort of that I try to create that distance first before one gets too close. Like, hey, this is
The
just
preemptive strike we were talking about. Yep.
right, right. And so I know he let me talk about it a little bit, and for the sake of time, we were like, all right, cool, let's get started. And yeah, because for me, I was going to go on and start putting in all the details,
Yeah,
and
because you had gone about 30 minutes, And so we had a
Yeah.
2-hour session, right? Well, I was watching the clock because I
Hmm.
wanted you to get it out enough where, like you said, you were trying to include Pastor, right? So he was in the loop. And so I almost right on the dot at 5:30, that's when I was just like, you said most of it. And that's when I was
Hmm.
just like, okay, let's just jump into it.
Yeah. And I mean, subconsciously, I may have been a little bit, but still a little bit scared. Like, man, what's going to happen? Are we, what? Like, really, I didn't know what to expect. And
Of
so,
course.
me prolonging the story a little bit probably was a subconscious anxiety that I was having. And so, now that I kind of think back on it, really, but I closed my eyes and I didn't open them until you told me to. And I,
Which was 2 hours, which was an hour and a half later.
yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
that it's crazy, like to realize. Because what I experienced and what I'm about to describe and tell you and anyone who's watching about is this did not feel like an hour and a half
Right.
when my eyes were closed. It really did not. I don't know how to explain that. I don't know. Time
You
dissonance,
can't, you
time
can't, bro,
dilation. You,
because
you can't.
in the
Yeah.
spiritual realm, there's no time. And so when we tap into the spiritual realm like that, time goes like that. That's why even for like this podcast, I
Hmm.
put 2 hours, because even though we're not in our imagination in the spiritual realm, we're still talking spirit, and the
Hmm.
spirit is flowing through you, through me. And so time, believe me, I've done this so many times, these podcasts, that people are like,
Hmm.
2 hours, like I can't talk for 2 hours. I'm like, okay. And then they'll be going. I'm like watching the clock and I'm like, all right, man, hey, because I always try to be respectful of people's time. So I'm like, hey man, we got about 10 minutes left. Is there anything you want to wrap? And they're like, it's almost been to, yeah. So that's what happens. You can't explain it because again, there's no time in
No.
the spiritual realm.
Right. No, and I agree. I mean, firsthand, just witnessing through the experience, it was. I didn't real. I mean, again, when not when I woke up, when I opened my eyes, I'm like, that's time already. Like,
Mhm.
but
So, Helen, brother, let me jump in here before for everyone
sure.
listening. What, and I'm not going to talk about your past. What emotions or what were you struggling with that's why we met? So that way everyone can kind of hear. Because again, there's people that are kind of struggling with what you were struggling with that
Hmm.
don't know this is something that can, right? Where Jesus come to set the captives free and heal the brokenhearted, which is what you experienced. They don't
Hmm.
even know this is available. So like, so they can relate to you. What were you like, some emotions or feelings or thoughts?
Mm.
What were you struggling with?
I was real in terms of thoughts. Starting there, I really was afraid of being judged before, being misjudged. Really,
Mhm.
I mean, in high school, I accepted that being judged is just a part of, it's a part of life. It's a part of reality. It's going to happen whether I like it or not, and I'm cool with that. And I was
Right.
cool with it then, right? But then, I experienced I experienced such a horrible hardship, in my life that just flipped everything upside down. And, so, in the last decade, I've been afraid of being misjudged.
Mhm.
Someone doesn't really get to know me. So I would feel honestly just hopeless. I've had dark thoughts before.
Okay.
I've had, I've been there, especially in the earlier years. I thought, what's the outlook for my life, right? What's there for me? Like I failed. This is, I'm
Yeah.
not good enough.
Why move forward? Right.
Why?
Why go on?
Right. And I thought, so I felt ashamed. I felt guilt. I felt, that I was like, I just wasn't worthy. Like I was inferior to everyone else at this point. And, and I was scared again of being misjudged, misunderstood, isolated. And I would isolate myself just to prevent someone from isolating me
Hmm.
counter defensively. I kept myself, I felt like I would just be held, like I would be dismissed, like people were, if people were to hold me in some, maybe contempt is not the right word, but yeah, just feeling dismissed really, like, oh, nah, he doesn't really matter. Well, like just not being acknowledged,
Right.
without an opportunity to actually say, hey, I demonstrate like who I am and how I am and what I can do.
Well, and it
And
goes back to
so,
self-fulfilling
yeah.
prophecy. Right? Like I taught you guys at the seminar about strongholds and all that. So that lie you were believing,
Hmm.
when all these things would happen, you're like, yep, see, I was right.
Yep.
And then it's just that
Validated.
loop that just keeps you in it.
Hmm. Yes. And so walking into this session, I remember, I mean, I remember feeling and experiencing some of these things because when I closed my eyes and you asked me to, I was asked to think about, what it is that I was feeling, what I was hearing, what
Mhm.
it is that I was meant to, what am I trying to see and understand? And in that moment, I was kind of getting stuck in my own mind, like am I supposed to say like the right thing, like what? But I wasn't letting go. I was holding on to, all these countermeasures, these defense mechanisms. And I remember right at the beginning of our session, a couple minutes in, trying to just get started, you said to me, "Hey, just, just don't overthink it. Just say what comes,
Yeah,
and
and the
what is."
reason why I said that, and I told you in the
Mhm.
session, is like I hear God telling me you're overthinking, you're thinking too much, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, bro, that people need to realize. Like when we're in these sessions, I don't know what's going on in your life, other than the little bit that you shared with me, right? But like
Hmm.
that in that moment, I don't know that you're overthinking. It's like I literally hear God tell me, "Hey, he's overthinking," telling him to stop. And so that's why I said that. It wasn't like because
Hmm.
people try to. I guess throw me in the box of a therapist, and this is not therapy, bro. I don't have, as
Hmm.
you know, there was no script, even like today. There's no script, there's no
Right.
nothing. It's like, hey, let's see what God wants to do today, right? What he wants to show
Hmm.
you. And so again, just these podcasts, I also want to be like teaching and equipping people, like, hey, when you hear that thought, like that's God talking to you. Like we talk
Yeah.
about with Tom and Jerry, the angel or the demon. It's like someone's talking to
Right.
you. You just got to figure out who's communicating with you. But speaking of the spiritual realm, I want to back up just a quick second because this is pretty powerful. Right before we got started, when you told Pastor your story or whatever, right? And we were just
Hmm.
about to start, you encountered something that was a trip because you said, even as I'm sitting here, you're like, I can feel a presence. You can feel, right? And it was an evil presence. And you're like, it's even like a cloud. Wasn't it like a cloud? I think you said, you're like, it's like a
Yeah.
cloud. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because that to me is powerful because again, other people are having those experiences, not realizing that it's an evil spirit. And they're just like,
Hmm.
oh, it's a premonition or I feel something or yeah, dude, it was something, but we know what it was, right? So can you speak to that? Because that was powerful. You even started
Absolutely.
getting emotional when it was happening to you.
Yeah, I remember. Yes, because, walking into this, I knew we were going to pray, but I didn't know how this was going to go. And so, as I was talking to Pastor about kind of just my past and talking to him about what I've been struggling with and how and all the details, I started to struggle conveying it because one, I was feeling anxious. Maybe I might want to recall correctly. I want to be clear. But I vividly remember, like, I'm a very visual person, visual
Yeah.
learner, so that's the way that I captivate. I could just picture just a white and blue sky, white clouds, but suddenly just filling with dark clouds in my mind. I really couldn't think. It's just foggy. And the anxiety, what that felt like, um it really just felt like, here in my chest cavity, right with my sternum, just felt like it was just super tight.
Mm.
It's just starting to feel like, and maybe many experience anxiety that way, like it's a tightness in the chest or difficulty breathing. I was able to breathe fine, but I could tell like there was a lot of energy stirring here, and it just felt stuck, like it just felt tight. And so, and yeah, and I couldn't think, it felt like dark clouds, felt a lot of tension. And I wasn't afraid of either of you. I was just, again, just trying to convey and be clear and even being concise. I felt like I was just stumbling over myself. Like I couldn't, or like I actually just couldn't get the truth out, clear, easily enough. And I think and I was paused at the moment too, kind of just like, hey, you okay? What are you feeling? What are you currently? I think either you or I think yeah, it was you that you stopped me and you were kind of like, hey, like, what are you feeling right now? What are you currently
Yep.
experiencing during the session? Um,
And let me just
and
jump
again,
in
that
for those listening because
yeah.
again, you were just like my chest and kind of like energy, and I just cut right. And so it's like
Hmm.
that was a spiritual attack. Right? And so for those
Hmm.
listening, if you ever have that, it's not you. It's not you making it happen to yourself. Like you said, bro, you literally felt like a knot, like kind of closing your like, come on, like
Hmm.
that is a spiritual attack. Because again, this is what I love about these
Hmm.
sessions, bro. I see the most amazing breakthroughs with people. Is that spirit knew it was about to get kicked out. And so it's
Hmm.
almost like its last ditch event, You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Like, I
Yeah.
got to grab a hold of this guy or whatever. Because I remember when that happened, I immediately went into rebuking fear and confusion. And I prayed peace over you. And I prayed that you would hear crystal clear from God,
Yeah.
because I already know what's
Hmm.
happening. And so again, for those of you on the podcast that have never heard stuff like this isn't weird. This isn't all ooh wah wah. Like, this is legit stuff. This is an actual experience that this guy had. And that's why I wanted him on this podcast, is for him to describe from his mouth his experience, right? And I love that you're so visual, bro. So am I. That's how I can usually recant stories and repeat stuff like pretty accurate, because it's like etched in. And so,
Yep.
yeah, I just wanted to jump in and share that, because that's what that was. That was the spiritual attack coming at you, like you said, literally trying to close your throat, like your chest, and just all the knot and tight. And
Cloudiness.
yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, even, yeah, and like I was mentioning, when I stepped into, when we started the prayer, when we started the actual session itself, and we started praying, and we were just speaking, what is Jesus saying to you? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? Not that the clouds were looming again, but it was just hard. Something was still kind of grabbing onto my tongue or my brain, and just saying, hey, you know, you gotta be 100% clear about what it is that you're seeing. And I'm just like, well, I'm overthinking it, really is what I realized. You helped me realize. And so, as soon as you called it out, I stopped just trying to give you the answer that you maybe wanted to hear. I needed to give you the answer that was really true in what I was seeing, what I was experiencing.
correct.
And man, I'll probably still have a difficult time explaining this to people, because what I then began to see, and I can recall all of this like it was yesterday. I remember
Uh-huh.
just seeing just a clear sky, mountains off in the distance, green plains and pastures, and then like way, way off into the distance, I just remember seeing a tree. And as we were getting closer and closer, and just hearing Jesus getting closer to that tree, I mean, I could tell it was a tree, but we were very far.
You
And
were like in a
so,
field, if I'm not mistaken, right? You were in a field and saw
mhm,
the tree way off. Yeah.
yeah, a singular tree, not a forest, no, it's just a single huge tree. But again, way off in the distance, and mountains, that covered the backdrop of the scene. And as I'm getting closer to it, I remember just experiencing the hurt being present, but it wasn't something that I was actually feeling bodily. It was just I was starting to see glimpses of the past. I was starting to see moments where I felt alone, where I felt isolated, because essentially what I would see the scene, being across this field, seeing everything for its glory, and just being in awe. Suddenly, like as soon as I would turn my head, because as I was in this moment with Jesus Christ, and mind you, like if someone were to ever ask me, like, well, what did Jesus look like? All I could see was just bright light, a robe. I could see his hand, I could see his face, but it wasn't blurry, is not the right word. Like honestly, the light was too. I couldn't. Like your eyes just kind of squint when you look.
Hmm.
You kind of try to look at the sun, but you're not supposed to.
Right.
I looked at Jesus, and I was just like, gosh, like it didn't hurt, but like just looking it was so bright, and I really just couldn't make out all the features, but it was just but as he was asking me to turn over and look at where I've experienced, this guilt, this shame, the fear, anger, and resentment, even, throughout my life, I recalled, and I'll share some details here. I recall the time when I was 4. I mean, just a quick short story, because this was very vivid in this whole session.
Yeah.
This involved my step grandfather. This was every Christmas we would go, not every Christmas, but most Christmases we would go to, my dad's side of the family lived in Mexico, and so we would go and visit my grandparents. A lot of my cousins lived already there, and for Christmas, we'd get around and circle around all the grandkids, and they would give us gifts. And I was old enough to actually participate. I was 4, turning 5. And so I remember like it was yesterday. we were all put in a circle. We were all called, everyone was called individually by name. Here's your gift. Here's your gift. Merry Christmas. And then as soon as they finished, I was the last one. No one called my name. I didn't receive a gift, and I'm looking at everyone around me just throwing their gifts, happy, just sharing showing them to each other, their other cousins, their parents. And I just remember in the moment, I just felt like I'm not loved. This is logically, I didn't think this because I was 4, but I remember the feeling just being like this. I'm not. No one loves me. I don't get a gift. I don't. And so I just ran away. I ran away. I isolated myself. I absolutely. And I went and sat by a stairwell and by myself until my mom came, and she consoled me and she hugged me, and she's like, it's gonna be okay. My grandmother came and she hugged me, said that she's got a gift, kind of in secret, hidden. But why my grandfather didn't want to give me a toy was another family issue that was between them. I was just it was being taken out on me.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not going to realize this at the time, but the reason this came to mind, the reason I saw this during the session, is because feeling unloved, it goes so hand in hand with over the last decade, being misjudged, being misunderstood. Like I'm not going to be accepted. Like I'm going to be isolated and kind of left out of the group. I'm not going to be welcomed in or embraced, or like I have to pretend in order to actually be in that, to feel like I fit in. That's not love. And that's not love. And feeling that pain, that maybe one person, and it's not like a romantic love, it's just human love,
Right.
compassion, being empathetic, or being, really just love speaks in many languages, but really just being one to be understanding with one another, and to not be given a chance is for me, it equates to not being loved. And so I would isolate. And so I saw this during the session, and thinking back from a worldly view, I just remember the hurt. I remember the pain. I remember being alone. I remember my mom being there to hold me. My dad was asleep, so I know that he was woken up and he was angry, but my mom was there embracing me. When Jesus asks me to turn and see, to look closely, my mom is on one side and then he is sitting on the other. It's like I've been there I've been there the whole time. And
how did that make you feel? Because obviously you've experienced the pain, the hurt, right? For what, probably 28 years, more or less, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've been experiencing it. So in this session, when Jesus was like, hey, look around, like turn, and you see him there, like how did that change the perception, the reality of that moment? Like what healing or clarity did it bring to you?
That I really have never been alone. I've never been alone, even in that infantile moment in my life. Because I can, looking back at moments when I was older and I was alone, or I felt like I was alone. I mean, not to fast forward so much, but I saw glimpses of other moments in my life when I was a teenager, when we moved from Texas to another state, having to make new friends. Feeling alone I've experienced it in many ways, and having to kind of try to fit in was part of the whole exchange of, all right, well, this is how I'm gonna, kind of be with everyone else. And Jesus showed me that, oh, hey, I've been with you all of those moments. So what that meant for me and what I experienced was love. That I've always been loved. I've never been alone.
And especially when you're in a session like this and you taste his love, it's a love that, like, it's the perfect love. When Jesus took you back to that memory, I remember you told me, I'm 4 or 5 years old, I'm sitting on the stairs. So when you first saw that memory, you saw yourself by yourself, sit like how it really happened. And so I love that a little bit later, after all of that, I didn't tell you, Jesus is the one that told you, like, hey, look around. And that's when you saw him there, right? So that's what I think is so cool about this stuff, is that he took you back to that memory exactly how you remembered it, right? But then kind of pulled the veil back so you could see the supernatural and see that literally Jesus was sitting there with you on the stairs.
Absolutely.
Powerful.
And I remember this during this part of the session too. I was taught to always be respectful, to be obedient, to to show reverence to
Yeah.
my elders. I love my grandfather, my step grandfather. Like I never held it against him this moment, but to say that I truly forgave him, I don't remember ever saying that to him, or actually even in prayer and confessing to Christ that I may have had resentment, for him for many years. I hid it. I didn't show it, and that was just a part of masking that, because of what my parents taught me. And in this moment, I remember always the times that I would message him on Facebook when he was still alive and saying, hey, Gramps, I love you, hope you're well, this and that. But never, not once, did I say, hey, grandfather, I just want you to know for all that it's worth that I forgive you for everything.
Mhm.
We don't have to go into the details with them mention anything, but I forgive you. Never got that opportunity. And so during the session, I got to confess that to Christ and say, I forgive my grandfather. I love him. He's not perfect. None of us are. You know, what he went through in his own life that made him, or that brought him to be the way that he was, I probably won't know until I meet him in heaven someday.
Right.
And I'll get to ask him. And so forgiving him in that session was just, it really began to open my eyes much more to, and really my heart, not just my eyes, because in this, being in the spiritual realm with Christ, just more, it really was just a transportation to all these different moments. And I remember very clearly, just this was a moment for me to really accept that I accept my grandfather. I love him. No, even if he was imperfect, even though he was, my dad had a hard life growing up, and he left the house at 14. That's a whole nother story, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of reasons that I could resent him. But moving forward in all of this, seeing that glimpse of my own childhood and seeing that Christ was right there was, for many, and I'll speak, in a logical sense to this, when like I'm able to experience goosebumps, like, if I center myself, I can give myself goosebumps, like I know how to do it. But for it to be involuntary, when experiencing these moments, it was way different than that, because normally I can feel it, and I can feel it in my arms. And I think it's called like piloerection, and there's like a very few small percentage of people that can do it in the world. And so, not saying I have any superpowers to that, but it's
Yeah.
just somewhat of a control of the nervous system. But in this moment, feeling that embrace, not being in control, not trying to think of myself, not trying to think of any of those things, but seeing where I was and how Jesus loved me and has always been there throughout my life in the moments where I've been knocked down the worst. That feeling that I just described, the goosebumps, it was everywhere. And just felt like, his hand was just embraced, just on my neck, on my head, on my shoulder, in places where I normally wouldn't. I couldn't, if I give myself goosebumps, I don't experience it in those areas. So this, saying, really the belief in this was extremely supernatural for me.
Well, you said you even
Ex-
felt warmth, right? Like on your neck.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt comfortable. I felt at ease,
Mhm.
and like I was just being embraced. And really, I mean, if I had to paint a picture of what it felt like, it's really just Jesus standing behind me, had both hands on my shoulders. He's like, "Hey, just look
Mhm.
right there, witness this." Um, and that was just beautiful to experience that, And I experienced moments where, again, just taking past events in my life leading up to, the hardship that I experienced. Um, I The way that things transitioned during this session, for a moment, I was looking at a field, looking at a tree. The tree at some point, began to bear fruit. This was a little bit later on in the session, but experiencing his love and knowing what it is that I am able to really do and like how I have already been equipped, was being demonstrated in terms of how fruit was growing off of this tree. Forgiveness,
Mhm.
sharing my story, being vulnerable. Because I mean, sharing my story is one thing, yes, and perhaps I may be still hesitant to do it on the internet, because it's so much for me to try to encapsulate, especially within the last hour that we may have. And so, but it does not disregard the fact that Jesus is really with me throughout all of those moments. And so taking a bold step to share any part of my life history, goes to show that Jesus is there even in those moments with me. And it really felt more true in this session than in any other moment in my life where I thought, Jesus, like, show me a sign, show me you're real,
Right.
trying to tempt the Lord in a sense that, like, if you're real, show yourself in some way. And I've done that, because maybe out of anger or out of frustration or feeling hopeless. And so during this transition, kind of going back to a more present moment, I remember then just kind of being lifted off from this field that I was looking at, and I was in space. And in space, I could see just the beauty of all it. What I was thinking of is just this was all of the opportunities
Mm.
that I can take to be with Christ, to move forward, and just all of the beauty was around. But in between all of this was, for any astronomy, people that are all into astronomy and such, there's a lot of voids in space where there's nothing, pitch black for light years.
Yeah.
I could see myself that if I didn't continue walking with Christ, and this is what the session, this conversation being had with Jesus, what he was telling me, what I was understanding, what I wanted to tell him, all of this related to if I continue walking alone, then what it's going to feel like is not this view of stars. It's not going to be this magnificent view. It'll be where I'm entrapped in a void and there's nothing. And that's what it's really, to really feel isolated in the world. Being isolated can mean I can be in my room and be away from everyone and just, be around my equipment and my
Yeah.
computers and talk online with someone. And yeah, I'm alone, I'm isolated, but I'm not truly alone.
Right.
But what I experienced and saw up there, and like, that's, imagine that, it's like, but then to make it even more visceral, we go back down, the field clears, everything is just a desert. Everything's just a desert. And I remember just seeing, walking in the desert myself is equivalent to me just walking my life alone and missing all of the opportunities that I could stop at an oasis that Jesus can provide for water, for rest, refuge, shelter, food, perhaps. And because from a bird's eye view, this desert was vast, but I could see the spots, around certain sand dunes, and there's an oasis here and a little waterfall over here. Things you may not find in an actual desert, but an oasis perhaps yes, or a small little town
Right.
where you know. But without Christ, and if I'm just walking alone, Jesus showed me. He's like, you can walk alone if you choose to, but this is what it'll be like. You'll be dry, there'll be you will be thirsty. And eventually you may fall to your death in this desert when all of what can save you is around you.
That's powerful. So let me ask you this. What hearing that directly from Jesus, because like I've told people before, like when we're in session, sometimes God will tell me something, right, to ask you or tell you, which
Yeah.
that's powerful. But there is nothing like Jesus himself telling you that. So what did it mean to you to hear Jesus tell you exactly what you just said?
What did it mean to me? I
Yeah,
mean,
because that has to hit you on such
gosh,
a deeper, harder level. Because like someone could give
yeah,
you that advice and you're like, yeah, whatever. But like, dude, you're there in that moment with Jesus. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. It reminded me of the story, 40 days and 40 nights. And that for me was the example. Like I could see myself walking the desert alone. And Jesus pointed out, like, you can do that, sure, but you'll only go so far.
Mm,
With me, I'll help you navigate. Some people may join you along the way. I'm in the front. I'm always guiding you.
yep.
I'm always guiding you. And just being reminded of that was powerful. That I don't have to navigate life by myself because then it feels like a desert. It feels dreadful. It feels hot every day. And that I constantly need to drink, 3 liters of water just to sustain myself.
Yeah.
And but with the Lord, he quenches that thirst. And beyond that, I mean, just a deeper meaning to it is it was really a reflection of how I've been living my life, especially the last 10 years. It's just been, I've been on my own. I've been trying to navigate and find respite, in areas that I felt maybe could re-nourish me mentally, physically, and gaining some of that sustenance, food, water, and shelter. Christ not being a part of that,
Mhm.
all of that just felt like it's just temporary. Oh man, it's just so much money being used here and wasting money here, wasting money there, and then that's a whole nother another dependence that one can I could easily fall into. Thankfully not, but something that I thought about. You're like, oh, I gotta find more ways to make money myself, and gotta. What if I didn't have a job, and then because of everything, what would I be doing? I'd be living out of my car, or but no, I mean, fortunately, and thank the Lord, he's provided in all of those instances, all of those, yeah, I was homeless for a very short while, but that short while, I had people that supported me, people that were like, hey, like, whenever you need a place, here I am, and
Right.
so, but me thinking, and I mean, not even being bashful, was like, no, I don't want to be a burden. That's what it felt like. I don't want to, I don't feel comfortable being prideful. Those things just started hitting back like I'm not worthy of these support options. I mean, the Christ was providing me boats to get out of the water to. And so the desert for me, I've always symbolized my personality as a cactus. I reserve my own water for a long period of time for the sake of being hydrated. And cactuses actually, cacti actually do this in the desert. They preserve their own water. They have thorns and such to prevent others from breaking that apart and getting to that reservoir. So for me, my personality I just surrounded myself as like a cactus.
Mhm.
I mean, I even have, where's my hat's probably in my car. Oh, it's right here. I have a hat, literally. I mean, just to be comical, and I like the color. I like the cactus itself.
Yeah.
People would say, "Oh, that's a cool hat," but in my mind, it's like, well, that's how I feel.
It
Just
means
I'm just
something. Right.
right. So to see the desert, see myself walking. I mean, that cactus from that hat, Christ was like, no, I see where you're walking. Sometimes you walk with me, sometimes you go on your own path, and that lack of consistency was really it's been affecting me in my life, right? Up until this point, of this session where I was just realizing it all. I was seeing it and it was changing my belief. It was evolving, how I don't need to see Christ in the world. He's all around me. I don't need to see him physically because I can feel him. I know that, so for me to walk alone anymore is I'm reminded of that image that I'm walking the desert by myself. And then realizing that um just suddenly being teleported back up to space. I mean, which again was cool because how this happened in the session was it's not like I mean, if you think of a dream, for example, and I wasn't asleep, you and the pastor can test, can attest to this. In a dream, suddenly like you may blink and it transitions. Well, I there was no blinking really in the session. I was wide-eyed looking around as I had my actual physical eyes closed. But I remember just suddenly just it almost like everything kind of blended in and out of, all right, we were in the field, we were in space, now we're hovering, and now we're back down on Earth seeing this desert, and now everything just kind of wiped away, turned back into space. And this is where I saw one of the most incredible things, that, I mean, Christ does anything that seems impossible. But I remember you asked me, what is it that I'm seeing? And I mentioned to you that, well, I see a whole bunch of just space rocks everywhere, just a whole bunch of rubble, almost like if you think of Saturn and Saturn's rings, just a field of rocks,
Mhm.
asteroids, and just scattered around, floating, and just like and almost like there's just debris everywhere. It didn't look pretty. It looked like it was just broken apart. And suddenly, as I'm trying to understand this and see what's happening, how I have felt, especially in the last, especially over the last decade, is broken,
Mhm.
shattered apart, spread thin. And what I started to see in this in this part of the realm was all of this rubble, all of these asteroids were just coming together, all in front of me. Like I was not being affected, nothing was moving through me. It was just all kind of it's like it was like the if this was like a movie theater, this would be like four dimension, view in all of
Right.
its in all of it. It was just amazing. Everything was just kind of coming together, and it was forming this, like it looked like molten rock. It was really hot. Then it started getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And oh no, I'm sorry, I skipped one part. All of this came together, and yeah, it started turning into this molten rock. But then as it got redder and redder and redder, and then it started turning black. And I realized that this was a black hole, like forming in front of me. And black holes are, I mean, they're devastating, and they're very, we don't understand them fully. But this is what I saw, and seeing this from a farther view, I could then see, okay, yeah, this is actually a black hole. Like there's the event horizon. This is, light is bending around it. So that molten lava was just it was getting wider and wider and wider, and I was like, oh, this is a huge black hole. But then I started seeing like the light started to get brighter. The light bending around the black hole was getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And then it started to condense and condense, and then get brighter and brighter and brighter again. What I realized, is that this was a supernova happening in reverse.
Mhm. You said, which is
And
so weird to think of.
oh my gosh, yeah, I because it was so weird to see. I because it didn't make sense until like
Right.
I was like, oh, this is a sequence of events happening in reverse. Because when a star dies, if again for anyone out there that knows the process, and I'm no expert myself, but this stuff that fascinates me, when I was in middle school and high school, when a star dies, it implodes and it creates a supernova, and sometimes it forms a black hole. This all was happening in reverse. And
Right.
so I just thought, what in, but seeing this and witnessing this, I thought, wow, like, so I see this huge, just aurora, like just wide aurora, just energy everywhere, radiation, and may have been, and gamma. And, but then all of it started to come back and form. And then it was just this bright blue, white, like just almost like a liquid star. If I were to see, because stars, may be formed of so many gases, but seeing it so up close and not be affected, I was like, this looks like it looks completely out of this world. And it was beautiful. Just the colors and everything, how it formed, and oh gosh, like it may make me a little emotional because like I didn't realize what all of this meant until I asked Jesus, like, what does this mean? Like, what
Mhm.
is, like, why am I seeing this in reverse, And like Jesus said, 'cause I can reverse anything that's broken. I can put it all back together, no matter how desolate it looks, no matter how broken it is, no matter how um I had a napkin just in case for this moment. Um,
That's
no matter
powerful.
how no
That's
matter how
powerful.
broken it is, or I can put it back together. I can put you back together. I can essentially I can restore you. And that, I mean, to look at what that is, to be restored, and the process, it was beautiful. It is beautiful because I see it in my mind all the time now, that
Especially, bro, when
he
you were feeling like not worthy, you were damaged goods. Who would want you? Who would want to be friends with you? Who would want to love you?
right.
Like that's why that. Because I remember when I asked you, "What are you seeing?" and you're telling me all that, and I go, "Do you know what it means?" And you're like, "Nope." I was like, "Ask him." And then the same thing in the session, you started getting emotional too because what he was showing you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can restore you. I can put you back together. I can make you whole again. Why he showed me the restoration of a star, well, it made me, it really, and Jesus explained this to me during this, is that sight of stars that I would see, those are people.
Mhm.
We're all capable of that beauty. We're all like that, just the sight, being together, yet sometimes we feel like we're so far apart. But together, when we're seen like this, it is beautiful. And we all shine brightly. We all shine in different colors. We all shine, we all have our personalities. We're all, some of us are white dwarfs, some of us are, different types of stars, right? So to think, I reached a point in my life that I imploded. And I felt like I was imploding, and I was just releasing myself in such a way that was unhealthy, was really a depiction of a star that died, that imploded, and just all the rubble just spread across all across the universe. And but through Christ, through faith in Him alone, I can be restored, and that
So
is how I
okay,
feel. Mhm.
so this makes sense now. You explaining this is why when you saw the little rocks and asteroids out there, that makes sense why he took it, put it back together, the molten put okay. Now this makes sense to me.
Yeah, it was it. Yeah, it's such a it to see it, John, was probably I didn't do a great job explain, saying it as I was seeing it in the moment, but and especially in the 2 hours that we had. But golly, like when you recommended it, that I journaled about this after the
Yes,
fact, and I journaled, and I went into, almost like I almost wrote like half a chapter, like
good.
3 or 4 pages in a book, just, and who knows, maybe someday, I'll publicize that, because it was like, me explaining it right now and kind of being in awe, and just feel like I'm not being as specific as I can be, just for the
That's
sake
why
of
I told
time,
you to
but
go home and if you would, bro, write it down because
yeah,
the while it's fresh and it's like literally, right? Like if you'll just drive home 20, 30 minutes and just open a notebook and start writing, the
yeah,
details that you'll still remember and write. And even now, where was it, the 27th? What do we feel
yeah,
like 20 some days now? So even
yeah,
then, it's like we still forget little things. Like, for example, wasn't it, if correct me if I'm wrong, I thought when you were at that point where God was
mhm,
showing you that, didn't you see like shooting stars or like things going?
yeah,
Talk about that because that was cool.
yeah, yeah. No, the shooting stars was, you know, seeing shooting stars just meant how quickly, things can just take off and progress, and how beautiful really it is to see. But not only that, it was seeing that sometimes God has us on the right path, and seeing it from another perspective is, yeah, there are shooting stars that are already going light speed with Christ. they're in the right direction. They've got, not that they have life figured out. No, I don't think anyone does. But with Christ, it felt like everything was going in the right direction.
Mhm.
And seeing that, really, I mean, this was a view for me when I experienced it. It's almost like prayers were being answered.
That's cool.
Some people, I know, like in the movies or in sometimes in life, it's like you see a shooting star, you make a wish. You close your eyes, you make a wish, and you don't tell anyone about that wish. You just, and I've done that when I was a kid, absolutely. And it's rare sometimes when I see a shooting star, but when I do remember closing my eyes and be like, all right, well, I make a
Right. I
wish.
think we all did, bro. I think we all did.
Yeah, yeah. And so seeing this and seeing many of them too, it wasn't just one or two, it was
No,
just
it was a
several
lot. I
shooting
remember you kept
stars.
seeing them over. Yep.
Yeah, I kept seeing them, and it was, and I asked Jesus, what these meant, and these are other believers going in the right direction. Their prayers are being answered. They're through me, they are able to move. They're able to, I mean, it's incredible because, the origin of a shooting star is, I mean, I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend to know.
Mhm.
Um, but it's fascinating just to see. And so for me to experience and witness that it was a revelation for me to know, to understand that, Christ is moving through other people. And this is a way for me to see that, because being in space, seeing that everyone around me is a star, everyone around me is a planet harboring either life or the way that I saw it and understand it. And I asked him, I mean, life around us is to the quantum level, I mean, infinite. And so seeing this in space, I mean, where does it stop?
Right.
We, where does it stop, really? That's the question. And if anyone can answer that, hey, um, talk to John and John, let me know.
Right. Exactly. We both
You
want to know.
know,
That's right.
yeah, where does it stop? Where is that boundary? There's none. And
Cool.
so it honestly just thinking, I mean, really just reflecting back on it too, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since, because when I remind myself that I don't have to feel this level of shame anymore, that I am that just realizing and recognizing that I am forgiven. Christ has never abandoned me in my life. Catching all of those glimpses, catching me when even in my hardest moments when I felt like my heart was hardening, that I maybe didn't want to believe anymore because it was too much work,
Mhm.
or because it required too much of me, or I had to put on this mask of being a Christian, or I was raised Catholic, and so all these rules, nothing against Catholicism, of course, but
Sure.
I just remember growing up as a child, it's just a lot of rules, got every Sunday, CCD, confirmation, which are all very great things, investing and learning about the life of Jesus.
Mhm.
But it also felt that I was being taught, this is how I earn God's love. This is how I earn his worth. This is how I am worthy. And I'm not just saying that Catholicism does this. It could be
No,
any
but
religion.
it's the
Yeah.
mindset, brother. Because think of the guy we were dealing with last night that was opening his heart
Right.
last night at men's group. What was his
Yeah.
thing? His work,
Mm,
what he did for his identity, to prove his worth to God. So no, I know what you mean.
yeah. And so be recognizing and realizing that Christ has always been there for me.
Mm.
Whether I chose to believe that in those dark moments was my pitfall, was my moments of isolation, moments of darkness, moments of, dark thoughts. I mean, I never, and I say this, be, to be vulnerable as well. I never contemplated or I never contemplated suicide or tried to attempt it myself, but I contemplated the idea of death a lot.
Right.
what would the experience be like? What does it look like? What does one feel? And I mean, the reason for that is, well, if I live my life in isolation and this just, I start becoming unhealthier and unhealthier, and maybe I encounter some, I get cancer or some sort of disease, or some sickness, then at least I want to be prepared to what death would be like. That's how I would look at it. And it's morbid to think of. I know, recognize it's so morbid to think that, but it was just kind of like I was looking forward to just an earlier death in life, not
Right.
through suicide. Again, I didn't contemplate it, but I definitely thought about, contemplated death.
Right.
And I mean, those were the chains that I was shackled under. The devil just had me in a snare of, nope, just stay away from everyone. You're not worthy. You're not going to fit in. You're not going to belong. As soon as people see this or that or whatever the case, oh, be shunned. And then I would believe that,
Hmm.
or it would become validated, through, I go back and think about the strongholds that you mentioned, and one example happens, like, oh, there, yep, yep,
Yep, I was right. Exactly. Even though it's a lie you're believing, right? And again, the same is for a truth. If we're believing a truth, but it's just whatever we were believing was like, oh yeah, see, I knew it.
yeah. So circling back to all of this, seeing a the reverse of a black hole or a supernova, essentially a supernova explosion, just reversing back into a star. This is the moment during the session that I felt that that Christ was restoring peace in me,
Mm.
confidence, that vigor, power, authority, and just transformed me right then and there. And what that transformation looked like is going to be the last part that I'll, this sort of the last segment of the session that I'll talk to.
Yeah.
Um, Feel free to call out any parts if I'm missing a detail. It's just, I know that from this we circled back down to the fields, and we're now up closer to this tree, and I was invited to seek shelter, to go in under the tree, under the shade, and sit. Um, Most of my life, not most of my life, I'm sorry, but especially over the last decade, it's just felt like I needed to always be on the go, go, go. Always need to, flight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. Always got to navigate. Always got to be
No
thinking 10
rest.
steps ahead.
No
No
rest.
rest
Yeah.
at all. No rest. And that's tiring. Tiring is not the right word. It's exhausting.
Exhausting. Yeah, bro.
It's exhausting. And so this transformation, what that looked like was taking refuge under this tree and the Lord telling me, hey, you've shared your story, you've shared your past, you've shared what you felt through that. How do you lessen that burden? How do I give that burden to you? And Jesus looked at me, he's like, take your armor off, take off your own armor. You have this battle ridden chest plate that you've retied the knots on your armor to keep it together. You've soldered other pieces, and if you look at a battered knight, or from sometimes they look beat up, and then they
Mhm.
gotta, sometimes they just have to kind of put on another chest plate or another plate here, and
To patch
you
it up.
know
Yeah.
just to patch it up, put some tape here. The greaves are all torn. He's like, take all that off, just unbuckle, untie, rip apart. And so I did. And what that looked like was, one, it was just rust coming off, pieces breaking apart, like taking my helmet off, feeling self-righteous, prideful, just kind of blocking out all these other, um, just blocking Christ or anyone that was Christ-like or godly to try and help me. I just had a very thick, stubborn helmet on. Taking that off and just feeling the relief, feeling the air. It felt, honestly, like the sensations that I felt too. It almost felt like a little bit of wind was actually hitting my face, and so that warmth was turning into like a nice little breeze. Still felt
Right.
comfortable. I didn't feel cold, but it just felt
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 good.
felt good. Yeah, I felt like it. And I say this too because when I opened up my eyes after the session, I wasn't sweating. Experiencing all this, it just felt comfortable. And so, going back to this moment, I was taking off my armor. I was, and as I removed it, I could see just the ugliness, all the my like dead flesh. I didn't get scared looking at this because then underneath that, as I was like kind of wiping it down or uh, ripping some of it off, I was fine underneath,
Hmm.
but the old flesh just stuck to it. Whether I lived lustfully or whether I was living, in anger or frustration, all that built into these just what looked like cancerous pieces of my body, and just they were attached to this armor, like I was protecting it. So as I'm taking all this off, I feel this weight just I feel such a relief. I think I even remember no, actually I don't remember because I recognized after the session my glasses had fallen.
Right.
My glasses had fallen, but I stood up. I think, and I didn't stand up. I sat up straight because in this realm, in the spiritual realm where I was kneeling down. I was on both knees
Mm.
and just taking all of this off. And then I sat, and then I was taking off my boots, taking off my greaves, and then suddenly I think all it just started turning to dust. It just started to dissolve in front of me. And then Christ presents me. He's like, "This is put on this armor, put
Then
on
you were
God's
able to
armor."
yeah.
When I was ready to, take forth and declare, "Hey, that this is I'm going to walk with Christ. I'm not going to walk by myself anymore. I'm not gonna depend on my own strength. I'm not going to depend on my own understanding, my own ways of surviving. They've done well ish. They were
Right.
barely, I mean, not truly, like by the grace of God, he was acting in ways that I didn't see present in my life. But I was so focused on, oh, I gotta my own, gotta make money, gotta navigate here, gotta make some sacrifices here, gotta everything. And I open up this chest, and it's just this bright armor. I remember, I think you asked me
To describe it.
to describe it, and
Yep.
I was like, it's silver. But no, I'm seeing like multiple colors, but it was light shining through it, and it was just refracting everywhere. So I couldn't really, I saw it was kind of, there was some trim on it, gold, silver, but then it was just turning brighter and brighter, and I couldn't really tell, but I was able to, it wasn't hot,
Mhm.
it wasn't heavy at all, but I was able to put, as soon as I put it on, it just snapped into place. And I remember putting the helmet on last, and as soon as I did, just this soar of strength, just the strength just soared through my veins. I felt this like I could take a deep breath, and like in the armor would actually just expand with me, not take a deep breath and kind of have to push through
Right.
that old heavy armor. The Lord in that moment just said, now this is what it's like. Take on this armor, keep it on you, take care of it. I I was in awe. I was just shocked and in awe, just realizing that I was utilizing my own strength and my own intelligence and my own being to survive. And trying to get closer to Christ, I was like, no, everyone's being too logical, or no, this is not, none of this is really, what does the Bible say? Oh, the Bible says this, but then trying to understand it, and nothing was clicking.
Right.
But in this session, everything came together. And I'm just remembering too now that what it means to have faith in the Lord. I I remember I remember now actually that he shows me on a boat, and they're in similar to the story of when Paul is asked to step off the boat and walk towards Jesus.
Hmm.
my life trying to step off of the boat and walk towards Jesus faithfully, I would immediately start to feel like I'm sinking. Similar to me trying to get closer with the church,
Right.
trying to get closer with people, trying to share my story, trying to do all these things that Christ may be calling me to do, me saying, "Go, I'm with you. Share your story." I'm almost feeling compelled to say, "Hey, let's have a part two to this, and let's do it. Let's go. I'll go
Whatever
all
you
in."
want. Whatever. That's what I told you. We'll go as far and as deep as you want to go, bro.
You know, yeah, because they're
We
looking
can
at
go, dude. We're not committed to 2 hours. We can go 2.5, 3 hours. I got time. I ain't going nowhere. So if you want to do it right now, we can do it right now. If you're feeling that compelled and you want to just go with it, then that's your call, bro.
you know, yeah, it, yes, I and I thought about this. Maybe someday I'll share my story.
Right.
But first, I want to just clarify where I was for the session. I remember being on the boat, asked to step off,
Mm-hmm.
to walk faithfully towards Jesus, just like Paul would, just like Paul tried before he started to sink. And to feel that lack of faith was immediately turning back to walking alone in the desert,
Right.
walking alone in the desert to a certain death. And I recognize that during this part where just speaking with Christ and understanding what he was trying to help me see, what I was asking him, I I felt such a peace knowing that as I walk forward and I include others, sharing this with them, sharing my testimony, how I came to really not only just start believing in Christ again, to
Mm-hmm.
start surrendering to him is really where the start of it was. I never knew what it would look like, how it would feel to talk about it, and that's why right now I like to say like, oh, I'm feeling compelled to share my story. I just never would have thought that moment was like this is how it would have been. And just reflecting on the session, because this is ultimately what got transformed, what through his grace, what got transformed. And to this very moment, several weeks later, I'm in awe, and I'm lifted through him.
Well, I think the biggest difference is that, again, because you shared with me everything, right? And
Yeah.
I think what I see is the
Hmm.
difference of you're still telling your story, right? Because there's a couple times,
Hmm.
like after our session, that you've told me, "Hey, bro, I kind of felt compelled to tell this person that," right? But where before you were telling it fear-based, you were
Hmm.
doing, like we said, a preventive strike. Like, I'm going to tell them all this
Yeah.
so they don't reject me.
Hmm.
Right now, because again, like I love how powerful your encounter was with our session, that now it's literally like day and night. Like I remember as soon as our session was over, right? I had my eyes closed too, as well. I always do. And when I opened up, I looked at you and you were sitting very, dude, your face looked different. Your countenance looked different. You were standing very up. I remember I was like, this dude's standing very up straight. Like you said, we're sitting down, but you were just from the waist up. You were at attention almost. I remember telling you, like, bro, you look different. And that happens a lot when the spiritual stuff, deliverance, you get healed of stuff and all that. So it's like you've had such a radical, like, honestly, I was thinking about this the other day, Joseph. It's like, I don't know if you've read the story about Saul when he was on the road to Damascus, when Jesus appeared to him on the donkey.
Yes.
Okay. So he was helping corral the Christians and beat them and stone them and hurt them, right? All that stuff. And so it's like,
Mhm.
here he is on the way to Damascus on this donkey. And then like Jesus appears,
Mhm.
right? If I'm not mistaken, I think it knocks him off his donkey. But what's interesting is that the dudes that are with him can't hear Jesus. Like if you read it, I tripped out on that. Like I went back and reread it. It's just Saul. And
Mhm.
it's almost like where Jesus got his attention, right? He gets the scales over his eyes. He calls one of the guys to go pray for him, the scholars, right? And so now he's Paul. And so to me, because I love when after the session, I didn't realize our session was on the 27th until the
Mhm.
next time you and I were talking. We were talking about something and you said, bro, on the 27th. And honestly, I didn't know what you were talking about. I didn't ask you. You were in the middle of a story, so I didn't want to interrupt you. So I was like,
Mhm.
27th, what's he talking about? And then a little bit later on in that same discussion, you said something about the 27th again. And I'm like, I wonder if he's talking about the session. So after we left, I went to my calendar and it was the 27th. So to me, that day was so impactful because every time we've talked about it since then, you always mention the 27th. So it's like
Mhm.
the way I just kind of see it, it's like for you, it's like there was life before the 27th and there was life after the 27th, right?
Yeah.
Not giving me any praise or glory for a session, like all glory to God. So I see it almost like you're Paul, right? You were Saul, you had that encounter like he did on the donkey, and then it's Paul. Like seriously, that's how black and white I see it, how night and day. Like
Yeah.
not even the way you speak now, but I'm telling you, your countenance, even today, your confidence, like, bro, it's night and day difference. So that's why I was like, bro, I would love for you to just talk about the session and how it went and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I see now is that your
Mhm.
testimony is you don't say it's not fear-based anymore. In
Mhm.
fact, again, it was fear-based and now it's to the glory of God. Because of
Yes.
what happened in that session was revealed to you.
Oh
Bro,
my
that's priceless.
gosh.
And I want people to understand too, like where Joseph kept talking about, like, Jesus took me here, Jesus took me there. We go into these sessions, like, yeah, he'll say, hey, I'm struggling with this, I'm dealing with this. But really, we get into the session and it's Jesus taking them all those places. I'm not saying, hey, Jesus, take them back to when childhood trauma. Hey, Jesus, take them to,
Yeah.
the desert. Hey, Jesus, take them to a field with a big tree. And I think even at one point, weren't you in heaven or something like that?
Yeah. At the very beginning,
Yeah, at the
when
very
I first
beginning.
met him. Yeah.
Right. So it's like Jesus is taking him
The
because this is the
staircase.
thing. Jesus knows you individually, right? Everyone that's
Yeah.
watching or can hear my voice. And just like he knows Joseph on a personal level, and I'm going to show you this personal level because it's one of these things I wrote down. You got everything else, the armor, the old and the new, Jesus taking you different places. Oh, real quick before I do say that. Jesus, when you were having these encounters with Jesus, was he talking
Mhm.
to you like with his lips moving, or was it more telepathic, like you just knew what he was saying?
It's telepathic.
See, and that I want to bring that up because that's why I started studying our thoughts. And so when I have Tom and Jerry, right, the angel and the demon,
Hmm.
I don't necessarily hear a person in front of me with their mouth moving, but I have the telepathic thought of, hey, you should do this, or something evil or bad you should do. So, okay,
Right.
cool. Just wanted to clarify that for people that that's how Jesus in the spiritual realm was communicating with you. And that's how the spiritual realm communicates with us, is just our thoughts telepathically. So we got that. Jesus takes us to armor. And then so this one, so this will give you a little bit of time to figure out if you want to tell your testimony or not, because I want to cover this because this was huge. So you've talked about a couple things that you were struggling with about why we went and got into the session. About 15 minutes ago, you were talking about shame. And
Hmm.
so there was one point, and it was beautiful. And again, after you talk about this, I'm going to bring up something that made it personal to you. Like I was telling everyone listening, like Jesus is very personal. He knows exactly where he needed to take you, which traumas you needed healing from, which situations you needed healing from, right? So it's the story of, or the part, excuse me, where I felt the Lord say, all right, you have the opportunity to give him all your junk. So I want you in your mind to just start handing him all the shame, guilt, bitterness, whatever. And you start, do you remember, do you know where I'm going with this? And
Hmm.
you started
Yep.
handing him all that. And then I asked you, what did he do with it? So pick it up from there.
Oh yes, I remember. Yeah, because
Yep.
where I first met with Jesus was, it looked like heaven. We were up in the sky, it was a lot of clouds, but he was just standing by a staircase, and the staircase didn't go up into this infinite, you know, endless staircase. It was a staircase really that swirled around, and it was the same staircase. When I realized after that,
When you were a
when I was
kid.
4, I
Exactly.
sat at,
Yep.
and that's where Jesus first met me. At that age, where when I felt what I felt, and so that memory drawing in, and so yeah, no, I thought it was heaven, but it was just it was in the sky. It was just a staircase,
Because you guys were in
and
the field.
when
When we're doing this, you guys are in the field.
mhm. Yeah, and so for me, it was putting all of this into just a box. And when I hand him over this box, I could see it just he's just holding it so easily. Look, it's almost like it's levitating, but it just vanishes. It just completely dissolves. Doesn't turn into anything. Or I'm sorry, no,
It
it
went into the
dissolves, but
ground. It went into the
yeah,
ground.
yeah, that's what it was. Everything just kind of sprinkled onto the ground, almost like if it were seeds and soil and some fertilizer. But when it all hit, nothing. We talked a little bit more about what this meant to surrender all of this and walking forward now, and sharing my story. I just when I start to see like apples and just different fruits and
The tree.
vegetables growing
Yeah.
on the tree. Like
Yeah.
it seemed odd because things that you wouldn't normally see growing on a tree. But I mean, other than apples, I saw pears, I saw bananas, uh I saw tomatoes, but just different. It's like a garden was growing around the tree and off of the tree.
Right. And not
And it
only
looked,
that, there was a
mhm,
single flower that sprouted
yeah,
up. Right. And that's where I was going with this because it's like God, and this is what I like, God kind of showed me when you were talking through all of that. You're like, this is weird. I'm starting to see fruit now. And you're like, there's this single flower and dude,
mm,
immediately he's telling me it's like, it's all the manure, it's all the crap,
yeah,
it's all the junk that he's using. Right. And there's
mhm,
that verse that the Bible talks about beauty for ashes. And it was just
right.
so cool that all that junk he took and was actually using fertilizer. But that flower, I don't know if you remember a couple
It was
minutes after that, I asked
a
you, I was like,
sunflower.
I go, what kind of flower was it? And you said a sunflower. And then I said, what
Mhm.
does that mean to you?
Yeah. So the sunflower, embracing the Lord's radiance, being in the sun, being able to persevere. Um, it was honestly, it was so beautiful to see. It's indescribable because like how I saw it all get transformed.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things, all of these things that, are ugly and, seem like they're not going to be used for anything. It was turned into something good and fruitful. And so when I saw this sunflower come up from the ground, it reminded me of just the love and the radiance that Jesus pours out and keeps. And gosh, I mean, forgive me if if I'm missing a detail. I just going back and seeing this
Yeah.
moment, I remember I couldn't it was hard for me to even in the moment explain like just what it meant for me that all of these things, were turned into something more beautiful than I would have thought of. And so like seeing and accepting that for myself, I thought, well, I mean, the sunflower is my favorite flower. And I mean, reason being too is, and what I meant when I um, referred to it being perseverant.
Yeah.
Um, you know, one time I went and visited a national park, and I saw this road just far down, and the road had a crack here and there, but it was just pretty much desert all around. It was just desolate. This was an area where like the ocean had previously. This was the ocean's um, bedrock, or the bottom of the ocean at one point, and so I saw the sunflower just growing through one of the cracks on the road, and then off to the side there was just a small little, little garden of sunflowers that had maybe sort of the seeds that sprung over, and they were growing together by themselves. But this one little sunflower was just growing on the side of the road, through one of the cracks, and the crack was pretty wide, so there was some dirt there. But I mean, it was just on the side, and to how it's been surviving is nothing short of a miracle. But other than that, God demonstrated like I'm protected. I can embrace his radiance, and I can just continue to grow safely. Doesn't matter where I start, but I have this seeing that just by me handing over
Mm-hmm.
all this junk, we'll just call it, yeah, all the
Yep.
bitterness and the grief and the shame and guilt that I've just felt like I've riddled myself with over the years. It's just all of that is turned into something beautiful.
Exactly.
Sharing my testimony of, surrendering my life to Christ, and how I've then continued since then to seek him has been a journey up until this point. When on the 27th, when we had the session, all of it just became a wide awakening, and my entire belief system just changed. My belief in him has never changed, but the belief in myself and how he sees me definitely did.
Absolutely.
And
Your belief system is your foundation, right? And so it's like,
mhm,
that's the way I look at it on the 27th is your foundation got rocked. It got rocked like the old armor that was taken away and the new one put in. It's almost
yeah,
like you got a new foundation. And that's what I was
hmm
talking about with the flower. It's for the audience. That's how detailed and personal and how much Jesus loves you is that I've been doing this for so long that literally it could have been any flower. It could have been a lily, right? We're in a field. Could have been a daisy, a lily, a rose, but it was a sunflower seed. And so when he told me that it was a sunflower, excuse me, that I knew there was a reason that it was. So when you told me, you're like, oh, that's my favorite flower and it means this, right? It's like, that's just the way it is. And again, him taking you to all these places and all these situations that maybe you didn't even, right? Because so many times when there's hurt and trauma, bro, it's like we take that memory and we just shove it in the back and we don't want to think about it. We don't want to deal with it, but it's still affecting us. And so again, for him to go back all the way to when you were 4 or 5 and then show you different places and then take you here and there. And that's the cool thing is because in this session, I don't see any of this. Charles doesn't, the guy that was with us didn't see any of it. And so it's like, it's truly about you. So that's why
yeah,
every so often I'll ask you what's happening. What are you seeing? Describe this, describe that, right? And so that's where I look at it. It's just like your foundation is solid now. And because of this, your relationship with God is stronger. God's become more real to you because you can't go through something like that like you did and the other people that I do sessions with. The hard part, and I don't know how to, answer it sometimes, is people are like, well, I've been praying for this bitterness and resentment and anger to go away, John. So what are you going to do? I'm not going to do anything. Like, I'm going to just, I don't know if it's part of my gifting,
hmm
anointing, whatever, but I was like, we're going to connect with Jesus. I'm like,
yeah,
hold on. That's what I tell them. Hold on. But again, a lot of times they're like, well, yeah, it's just prayer. I'm like, yes and no. Like so I wanted you to share your story because it's so hard for me to describe this. And like I
yeah,
told you the other day, it's really almost to the point where people just have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. And they have to be desperate where they're like, look, I've tried everything. I've tried, because
hmm
I've helped people kick pornography, crystal meth, all kinds of stuff. And it's like, it's fascinating. It's
yeah,
fascinating, right? There's nothing God can't do, but yet people are like, well, I pray. The guy that we were talking about last night, right? He talked
yeah,
about he'd been going to a therapist for 10 years. He comes to the
true.
seminar I taught, that 2-day seminar. I did a
hmm
mini 5-minute session, and he got a breakthrough that he's been trying to do for 10 years with therapy in 5 minutes. Right. And it's not me. It's not a breathing technique. It's not all this stuff like the new age stuff teaches. Like, it's just straight up Jesus.
Yep.
Right. And so he had an encounter. And so that's why it's hard when people are like, well, what exactly do you? I'm like, I don't really do anything. I just kind of facilitate the meeting. And then it's you and Jesus are off to the races. It's like wherever you want to go, whatever he wants to do. So I appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else you want to share? We've got about 15 minutes less, unless you want to go into your story. Is there anything else you want to share or your story, or how you feeling about that?
I was reflecting on it for a good bit, and I truly want to keep this centered on the session itself, because
Okay.
really just feel, having that transformation, especially being so recent and having it, I'm walking forward now,
Yeah.
with Christ. And so and the reason I don't want to dive into the whole story of my past just yet is because I'm embracing the Lord's love through all of this as well, and I'm getting the opportunity to share this, um, really in more intimate settings with people, from our church,
Mhm.
even my coworkers, and like you mentioned, I no longer have this fear-based mentality on sharing it,
Yeah.
and so I glorify the Lord when I share this, and I glorify Him now that I get the opportunity to share the example just from all of this coming together into one session. I want to be mindful that when I share this story, it's in really it comes from a place that I can go into a lot into so much detail, but I don't want it to distract either from the importance and just the transformation that the Lord took me through,
Yeah.
from the 27th, and again, it being so recent. It's been really such a privilege to share this at church in person, and pouring out into other people's lives through that. And so honestly, I really want to I want to thank you, because me at some point down the road, truly I want to circle back and have another conversation and dive into all of it, kind of like maybe a part two. you
Whenever
know
you're ready, we
hmm
can absolutely make that happen. But just
hmm
to um I guess put a feather in your hat, right? Is like
sure.
just you even thinking and feeling compelled shows the healing. Even that you even thought of it, because before I was like, oh no, there's no way, right? But even when you're just like, should I? That shows me it's like you're again, that's just more of the healing, where it's just like, again, it's not telling it out of fear,
hmm
it's telling it out of to give God glory. Because now you've told me you've shared it a couple times in private with certain people, right? And even
hmm
some of them you give them the fast version, but it's just being able to show where you were at, how down you are, how hurt
hmm
you were. And so again, just like the armor, right? As you were telling the story the second time now, like I was just kind of thinking of that verse that when we get saved, it's like we become a new creation, right? And I
hmm
tell people all the time, it's like it just breaks my heart when people are like, I'm a Christian, but I'm broken and I'm this and I'm the, basically like they're not good enough and they're not worthy, right? And it's like, man, that's not what the Bible says. And so it's like, as you were saying that, I'm like, that's why I tell people, man, when you get saved, you become a new creation. God doesn't put duct tape and band-aids on you. And
hmm
I've always said that. So when you were saying the story of, it was patched here and kind of hanging together, I was like, that's duct tape and band-aids,
yep.
right? And it's
Yep.
like, no, like the new stuff that came on you, like not only, I love how you said, not only were you wearing it, like it snapped into place. It became on like you, the
Yeah.
new creation, right? So yeah, bro, like I said, I love the encounter that you had. Thank you for having the guts to say this, because like I said, it's not easy, but I truly believe people need to hear about this stuff, because they hear versions of the truth of the Bible, they hear versions of the truth of the spiritual realm, and they don't even know this type of healing is possible.
hmm
Right? They're
yeah.
struggling, they're getting their butt kicked emotionally and spiritually by the devil, by the enemy, by spirits, by whatever. Anything that's
Right.
not God, right, is just kicking them, bro, kicking them, and then they get down, and then he's kicking them more. And so it's like this stuff needs to be talked about, because like that verse says, how will the people know if we don't talk about it, we don't speak about it, we don't preach about it, we don't teach about it, right? Especially where you're like, you told me the other day, like you're kind of wanting to get into that, like you just have this heart to like teach people, right? And that's why I'm excited to get
Yeah.
with you and Chris on Tuesday to finish up the seminar for you guys, so we can get your vision statement, right, your mission statement, because that
Yeah.
way, like you have your purpose, you know exactly where you're headed and what you're doing. So I kind of have a feeling it's going to be tied to teaching. We'll just have to figure out what cause or people group that is on your heart, and again, we'll cover that on Tuesday.
For
But let
sure.
me see, brother, I think that's pretty much everything I had. So how are you feeling now that you've had the session, we've talked about it? How do you feel now, like since it's been the 27th? Like how have you felt these last 20 something days?
Man, oh gosh, light as a feather. I don't the cloudiness doesn't happen. Does not happen. I feel like I'm able to walk forward. It's really shown even at work too. I just when I go to church, when I'm just around, when I'm going and doing my errands,
Mhm.
out in public, I'm not being bombarded with all these thoughts and all these clouded thinking. I honestly just walking forward with intention.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then last thing I want to ask you, well, actually, I got one more question after this, but
Hmm.
afterwards, right, we got done with the session. Pastor had to take off, so you and I went to go get a bite to eat. So
Hmm.
talk about the part when we were sitting there talking, and you said, you know, John, it's like I felt like I had these dark black things on me all, and you're like literally touching different
Hmm.
parts of your body where you knew they were on you, and you're like, they almost have like hooks on me, like in me. Speak to that.
Yeah. So those really, they felt like tensions in,
Mm,
in part of my body. Like, kind of like when you kind of get done with a really, huge, long workout and your arms kind of sore. Well, for me, it wasn't feeling like I was after a workout. It was just like sometimes I would just kind of have these aches, and I'm pretty fit for my age.
mm,
And I've I was very active back when I was in high school and even after in service. And so, but feeling, being clouded with all of this beforehand, really, I would wake up and just when I experienced the dread or the fear or just hopelessness, just felt like, just like a knot in the back of my neck, or it would feel like just these different pressure points where I felt like I couldn't really move freely. So after the session, felt nimble, just felt like I could actually like stretch and have full range of motion, not like, "Oh, I better move carefully before I pull something, or if I don't want to pinch a nerve or something," because that's what these little tensions would feel like. And really, I mean, just the amount of thought that I would cloud myself, I would overthink and overanalyze and think about all the possibilities and how the outcome of certain conversations may go, and
yeah.
just always being so guarded with the way I navigate relationships or being personal with people. Those would manifest in those conversations as little, like little tensions, like. And then sometimes it would even be like I would break into this it would just like alter my temperature. It feel like it get like hot, if especially if I experience like a social anxiety, or kind of like being just overly timid about, maybe being too personal with someone. It just, yeah, I would feel like a cold sweat would come over. But yeah, these tensions would be, just when I'd be having some of these dark thoughts, and I would think less of myself and feeling like I wasn't good enough. And it just like, it was just like a coil, of myself, and I just kind of feeling. But no, now I feel nimble. I feel freed of that. And it's
That's awesome.
honest. I've been waking up every day just ready to go.
I can tell. Yeah, I haven't known you that long, but that's exactly the way you hit it on the head. You're ready to go. You're ready
Ready
to
to,
go.
yeah,
And so that's why I
yeah.
said that goes back to me fanning the flame. Like I see you're ready to go. You like put me in coach, like you know what I mean? Like I want to get in the game. And that's why honestly, I'm so glad that you became part of like our men's group and like getting plugged in there. And like you said, now attending events or church or men's group is like, oh, my friends are here, right? As opposed to kind of being by
Hmm.
yourself, not sure. Because like even like last night, like that guy really opening up, right? Instead of us at our normal Bible study, taking the time for one of our
Yeah.
brothers that was hurting, where he just really got open, vulnerable, cried a little bit.
Hmm.
To me, like I told you when we left, I'm like, that was church. It's not the building. Like that right there was someone hurting, one of our own. And like I told
Hmm.
you when we first showed up, these guys were so open and
Hmm.
just loving to me. And that's how come I knew they were going to be that way to you. I started there 3 months ago, but then the actual group was only maybe about 2 months ago. And
Yeah.
from the get-go, they were just open and welcome. And like, that's been nice because haven't had that experience even at other churches. And so
Right.
that's when I was like, okay, dude, there's something different. There's something special. I am supposed to be here. I'm feeling I'm supposed to be here. And then again, these guys being accepting, right? So I'm glad you're part of that because again, like last night, um, just being there for that guy. I followed up with him today. I'm not going to share it on the air, but I'll ask him if I can share it with maybe the group or you and Pastor, because I followed up with him today. And bro, what he wrote back was like, because I was like, hey man, when we were praying for you, did God show you anything? Were you experiencing anything? What thoughts were you? Bro, it was good. It was so good. And so that's what it's about. That's what
Yeah.
our gifts and talents are about, is to help people. And so for me, I was sitting next to Pastor, so he's like, "Hey, in a minute, we were
Hmm.
wrapping up last night." He's like, "Hey,
Hmm.
switch places with me so you can put hands on our friend." And so I was like, "Okay." And so, anyways, I think we went maybe another 10 minutes,
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of felt the Lord say, no, have everybody, like, have that guy stand up, me like facing me put my hand on his heart. Like I'm like you, I'm very visual. So I saw this, right? Stand up, put my hand on his heart, and then have the rest of the guys surround him and put hands. So that's why we did what we did last night.
Yeah.
And so I remember someone kind of saying something funny, like, oh, here inside Chick-fil-A. I was like, yeah, inside Chick-fil-A, bro. I was like, they need to see this. Right. And just,
I heard the same thing.
yeah, bro.
Yep.
And I was just like, I'm just at a point where I have no shame in my game. I don't really care anymore what people think. When you, especially, you know what I'm talking about now because of the 27th, right? Most people that are listening or watching, that are Christians or believers or unbelievers, wherever they're at with their walk of life, are just so, how can I say this would be nice? It's like they've just seen too many hypocrites. They've seen like they're reading the Bible, they're going to church, but their life isn't changing. They're not seeing the difference. They're just like, well, what's the difference between me and the guy in the world? And again, they're trying to walk the walk and do well, but they're not living by the Spirit because no one's teaching them. Right. And so like I didn't mean for the prayer to go on that long last night. I just pray what I hear and what I feel. And as soon as I like said 2 or 3 words, I felt the heat like into his heart. He didn't talk about the heat, but what he talked about, I know he experienced something. And so it was just one of those things where it's just like, you know, I would pray and just kind of be quiet and just kind of be listening. I will say this, I'm sure, you know, he wouldn't mind, and we're not saying his names, but one of the main reasons I followed up with him today is because I had my hand on his heart. And as I was praying, I felt his tear. He was crying, but nobody knew it. He wasn't like crying, but I felt his tears were hitting my hand. So I knew God was moving on him and touching on him, right? And so it's like, that's what people need. They need people like us that are going to stand up and just be at the point in our lives where, like, you know what? We've experienced too much to not talk about it, to not, again, we're not doing anything wrong in a Chick-fil-A. It's not like we were going table to table bothering people saying, hey, do you need prayer? Even though I don't think that's wrong, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we're doing our thing. To me, that's what believers, the body of Christ, should be doing, is helping. Right. Yes, I'm all about Bible studies and teaching, learning more. But you know what, dude? When one of our guys is hurting, like, that's what we do. You kind of like the olden days, right? You circle. Yeah, dude. You circle the wagons and you just do what we did last night.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm glad you're part of it. And like I said, I see you night and day. From the first day that I met you when you came up for prayer, when I was doing prayer team with that guy, to that's what I'm saying. It's night and day. And so I want to do my part. Like I said, to mentor you, take you under my wing, like we talked about. So I'm excited about that. So, brother, I appreciate your time today. We've got 1 minute. I mean, we're going to go past it.
Are you kidding?
No, remember I told you
30 seconds.
2 hours is going to go like that. That's why when you're like, I might tell, I don't know, but I'm like, we'll go 2-3 hours. I don't care. Like, we're hitting record. Like, let's go. I want to thank you because, like I said, I think one of the most important things we have as humans is time. And so for you to take 2 hours and just share your experience, right? That's what's powerful. It doesn't matter if people watching us believe this or not. They can't take that away from you. It's not like, I read a book and I just want to tell you this story, or I did this, or my friends, dad told me. This is your story. And that's what makes it powerful. So again, thank you, brother. I love you. And so I end all my podcasts with this. Looking back on your life, including the 27th as of today, if you had to look back and write a book about your life, what would the title be?
Wow. What would the title be? Transformed through Christ.
That is awesome.
So
you heard it.
Christ.
Transformed through Christ. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So 2026, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon bookstore. Be looking for Joseph.
Watch you just like predicted something that
I do what I can, bro. I do what I can.
Transformed through Christ.
Transformed through Christ. I love it. All right, my friend. I love you. I appreciate it, brother. And I'll see you soon.
Love you too, brother. Thanks again, John. And thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely. Bye.
All right.